I'm here with Charles Hoskinson. My name is 𝐲𝐥𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐧. I work as Chief of Staff at Input Output. And we are here to talk a little bit about rational privacy, which is a new concept that we've been talking about a lot. And Charles, we'd like to start today, since it's a lot of crypto folks here, we take it back to the beginning. Satoshi's vision. Where are we? How close are we? Do you think we've missed the mark? Have we strayed? Do you see some elements kind of coming to fruition now better than it has been before? What do you think?
Well, first, welcome to Jackson. I actually live in Wyoming. I have a ranch about a few hours east of here, but it's always lovely to come out here. It has some of the most beautiful views, and it's always nice to bring people to my estate. With respect to Satoshi's vision, it was very broad and ambitious, but surprisingly well scoped for its time. In the beginning, what Satoshi was trying to solve was this idea of moving value around in a decentralized way. And it seemed like an easy problem, but it took years and years and years for people to actually believe that he had solved that issue. And the minute that he solved it, we're unhappy people, so what do? We say we want more. So we wanted programmability. We wanted value to be programmable. So that was the Ethereum revolution. And there it's kind of like when JavaScript came to the web browser. You went from static websites that could be pretty, but they were non-interactive, to Amazon and Facebook and Google and all these other amazing experiences which were beyond what HTML provided. So we got smart contracts. And the Ethereum revolution led to the creation of a multi-trillion-dollar DeFi and blockchain industry. And then as we moved through the generations, then we started thinking, well, we need to have hundreds of millions to billions of people, so what do? We had scalability. And then we said, well, everything needs to talk to each other, so we need interoperability. And the more complex the resource, the more complex the governance. So Bitcoin can stay very simple as a protocol because it doesn't do a lot. That's by design. But when you're a smart contract system, every 15 minutes you have to upgrade something, you have to change something. You have to think about gas, and programmability, and pre-compiled contracts, all this crazy stuff inside the system. So that's all well and fine, but we keep asking when mainstream adoption, when real-world assets, when did the Magnificent Seven come in, when do we get to billions of users, when do we get to a reality where everyday people are using blockchain technology? And the reason they don't is that no one really deep down inside feels comfortable with everything you do, see, and say be known publicly by everyone, everywhere, forever. Pretty simple, right? You don't want your Google searches to be publicly disclosed. You don't want your ChatGPT logs to be publicly disclosed. You don't want your Amazon shopping cart to be known. Yet when we look at stablecoins, for example, it's $243 billion in issuance with stablecoins, 180 million transactions per month. Every single one of those transactions is publicly known. They're on a blockchain. You see them. They move around. If I can de-anonymize you, because it's pseudonymous, if I can link you, I not only know what you did today, but I know the entire history of things. So the crux of it is we have to talk about privacy, because everything in life has a public side and a private side. It doesn't matter if it's the cash register at McDonald's or who gets Sunday off on the labor chart, to a complex TradFi deal or classified information. There's a spectrum of privacy. And in the traditional business world, we have very well-defined not only technologies, but laws like HIPAA and GDPR and BSA to discuss that. But in the blockchain world, it's a little bit more complicated because you want privacy to be programmable. You want privacy to be a smart contract. You want private smart contracts and public smart contracts. You want them to talk to each other. But the minute you start talking about privacy, you at the same breath, at the same time, also have to talk about identity. Because privacy has a disclosure regime built into it. You could disclose just to you. That's called Monero or Zcash. You could disclose to your organization, but not the general public. You could disclose to the regulator and a selective subgroup within your organization. It's like an audit regime.
Or permissions, almost like on a Discord server. You got different views on different levels. Well, and you touched on something, because there's three elements to, obviously Satoshi's vision. We started somewhere. We got all the way to programmability and scalability, governance on chain, all sorts of great features. And now this fourth generation of blockchain, I've heard you talk a lot about this rational privacy notion, cooperative economics, and selective disclosure as the defining features of this fourth generation. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how those three concepts work together, along with putting both privacy and identity on chain.
Yeah, so you have to get rid of DeFi and TradFi and just have Fi. It's just like we used to have new media, and all this media stuff, legacy media. Now it's just media. And all the papers, what are they? They're online. If not, they're out of business. So similarly, when you talk about legacy finance will come into and is coming into the cryptocurrency space very aggressively. But they're having challenges because the lack of the ability to program your privacy schema and embed identity in and figure out how to do things like KYC and AML and KYT, KYB, they can't penetrate that last mile. And some of that last mile is regulatory, some of that's social, some of that's technological. You know, and what we do is we try to take a look at all of them at the same time and have that conversation. So the social elements are that the tokenomics of our industry are intrinsically adversarial. You got sweet water bottles in there. We had the Solana party yesterday. You know, you have Cardano stuff floating around. Everybody's got a token. And unfortunately, when you're in a Nash equilibrium or some zero economics, if you think, well, for my token to win, this other token has to lose, there's no path forward to standardization and interoperability because we have no reason to talk to each other. We just have to fight each other. People try to hobble each other. There's no trust in those relationships. You can't build standards if people don't trust each other. You can't build relationships if people are not economically incentivized to work together. So it's not good enough just to have a privacy regime, and it's not good enough just to have an identity regime, but cooperative economics is about how do you create a system where when we trade together, you get to use your token and I get to use my token. We both get TVL, we both get transaction volume, and guess what? It benefits both of us. That's trade, right? Maybe you make the car and I make the steel, and we both get something out of that arrangement. So we thought really long and hard about the economic models that would be required for that. And what we've noticed is that the space is moving multi-chain. The space is moving towards a mad dash towards zero knowledge. We're starting to develop things like capacity exchanges. We're starting to develop intents. Intents are where we should be. Because in blockchains, do you want to go and say, well, here are the 17 things I want you to do, and here's the exact instructions? Or do you just want to say, I want to trade my ADA for Bitcoin, or I want to trade my Bitcoin for SWI, or I want to use this DeFi application? That's my intent. Do I particularly care how the transaction gets settled? Do I particularly care the finality of that transaction? I may. Well, I put that in my intention. If I don't, well then, let me just say it and let somebody else figure it out. That's how a lot of finance works. You just basically tell them what you want, what's sacred, what's not sacred, and leave it to someone else to figure out for a fee on how to resolve that. Well, when you move to an intense world and you move to a world where you can pay in the tokens that you want to pay in, just like we do in legacy finance, I go to the airport, I pay with my credit card, and maybe I'm paying in dollars and I'm in London Heathrow, they get paid in pounds. Right. I don't care about that. That's the way it should be. Then suddenly the economics change. Because then you say, well, wait a minute, if I partner with these 5 people, it's going to increase my transaction volume, it's going to increase my TVL, it's going to create demand for my system, and it actually benefits their system because their system can do more. We're trading with each other. So that's really the 4th generation, is you put those 3 concepts together, and then those worlds that are so far apart, both within our industry and then outside of our industry, they collapse into each other, and you just have FI instead of DeFi and TradFi.
Of course, you get more trade. I'm hearing echoes of Adam Smith a little bit. You get some trade between these 2 countries. If one thing, a country does something better than another country, they've got a comparative advantage. But I think that the other piece here that you're looking at is this idea of selective disclosure. I know that we've been talking with lawmakers and regulators, policymakers here. Selective disclosure means something, I think, new in how regulators perceive crypto and how they perceive the blockchain space. And can you share a little bit about kind of your take on how those conversations have gone?
First, we all have to acknowledge no one's happy with compliance. The lawmaker isn't, right. The auditor isn't, maybe a law firm is because they make money from it, but Jesus. It's $500 billion a year. That's the global cost of compliance. You can buy the city of Tokyo once every 3 years, for the global cost of compliance. Does that increase the safety of, really? No. You got RICO investigations with certain banks. Certain other banks have paid $19 billion in fines in the last 20 years. People work with drug cartels, big brand names that are publicly traded companies, and they get a little slap on the wrist. No, nobody's happy with it. KYC doesn't work. KYB doesn't work. KYT, they don't work because the world doesn't live in a Westphalian notion anymore, and we're not on paper. It's global economy. I can create a crypto transaction that settles in every country on the planet at once. So is that a legal or illegal transaction? It's turbo illegal. It just depends on who you ask. But I could do that in 15 minutes, just building with the 𝐸𝐴𝐻𝐸 system or these other things. So our compliance systems were never designed for that global reality. And what you need to do is move from a retroactive compliance system where I take your money, and then if I notice something suspicious, the burden is on me as a merchant to play judge, jury, and executioner and file a SAR, to settlement is compliant. So what does that mean? It means that the transaction doesn't settle if it doesn't satisfy some game of 21 questions. Are you a accredited investor? Is this pre or post-tax money? Are you U.S. resident? Are you over the age of 21? Whatever the heck your yes/no questions are, you keep answering those with a zero-knowledge proof until eventually you get to a realization that this is a safe transaction or an unsafe transaction. And if it's safe, it settles. And if I have the money, I'm in compliance.
Right.
We accepted one of the greatest sins as Americans in the last 20th century, which is that the business has to do the job of the regulator. And the regulator don't want to change it because they don't want to go ahead and try to figure out how every day to handle trillions of dollars of value flow. So they pushed it to the banks and to the exchanges, and they made every bank a data pack rat. They made every bank a warden that has to watch everything. So with cryptocurrencies, the magic of what we have with selective disclosure and rational privacy is we can reset the relationship. And we can change compliance to a matter of code and libraries and best practices and zero-knowledge proofs and get to a world of automated compliance, automated regulation. And what the magic of that is that everybody gets to work on that, which means if you want to comply with multiple jurisdictions like software, what do? You call multiple APIs. You call the German regulation. You call the US regulation. You call the Abu Dhabi regulation. These are libraries like software. And the updating of those are public-private partnerships with an SRO on one side and the regulator on the other side. And me as a consumer, it doesn't matter if I'm an individual or a multi-trillion-dollar company, I'm using the same regulatory path. And it's totally automated, and it's built into the fee structure of the transaction. Now, if you do that, you know what happens? You take these siloed economies that run 9 to 5 and take the weekends off, and you change it to one global market that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with every single country in the planet playing that game. The amount of liquidity you'll create, the amount of transaction volume you'll create is going to change our economy forever. It's about $50 trillion when you start looking. Real-world assets alone are about $15 trillion. And that's just today. And the number one reason we can't get there, why our industry can't absorb, because the technology is getting ready, is the compliance and regulation side. So if you have those cooperative economics, we as an industry all start working together. And as one voice with a $3 trillion industry, it's hard to beat us. And if you have the selective disclosure and you have the private smart contracts, you have all the programmability you need to be able to kill KYC once for all.
Well, I know we've only got time a little bit for some closing thoughts here, but if you have a message for the people of Wyoming, and thinking about, okay, rational privacy, it's going to usher in a ton of new use cases on the blockchain, a lot of new businesses are going to be able to come up and flourish. What would you tell the people of Wyoming about the next generation of the blockchain?
And I'll tell any government agency here, you start with procurement. There's been back and forths on this, and I think governments have to update and modernize how they procure emerging technology, and it's not just blockchain, it's also AI. You got to look at all these new things that are coming, and the problem is they evolve and change too quickly. In fact, the leaders 2 years ago aren't even the leaders today. And so if you have a procurement process that either out of frustration you just give it to your friends, or bureaucracy, it takes 3 to 5 years to get something done, you're never a legitimate voice because there's not enough money, there's not enough time, and you'll get bottom of the barrel things for whatever endeavor you have. But if you change your procurement and you make it kind of an open process, and you make it agile and fast, then the best and brightest will come. You get a lot of diversity, and it'll change things. And that's just not Wyoming. That's the whole world. Like British Columbia did this.
Of course, yeah.
Any systems, and it was great. Abu Dhabi, we could change things in a matter of weeks with the DLT Foundation law. So any government that embraces that endeavor, it's going to attract great ecosystem. Great ecosystems translate to a wonderful benefit of the governed.
Thank you so much, Charles. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me on stage here. Thanks for inviting me to moderate a little bit. So, all right, folks.
Thank you, everybody.